when you open the door for somebody else.
Hello and welcome to the Vaccine Conversation with Melissa and Dr. Bob.
That's like the SNL skit where she tries to where Kristen Wiig's trying to anticipate what Fred Armisen is saying, and they go back and forth.
Yeah.
Oh my God, you did something funny. Like actually
I am funny. I am funny.
Okay.
Why do people think I'm not funny?
I've known you enough years to know funny is just not a way I would describe you. It's like funny, but every now and then you come out of the woodwork with something actually funny.
Cheryl says the same thing. Like everyone at work will tell her, or people that meet me or talk to me, they'll tell Cheryl, "Oh my gosh, he is so hilarious.
Oh my
He's
God,
so funny."
really?
And Cheryl's like, really?
What?
Really? So anyway.
Hey, I know funny. And okay,
oh my.
Just kidding.
Yeah, but I want to share just kind of we were talking in an earlier episode about family medical problems and and I guess I've been fortunate as a doctor. I don't often have to play doctor in the house, but I had to play doctor the other week with one of my kids who almost never has any medical problems. He's very, very healthy, and I almost never have to look at him. But we had fish for dinner the other night, and my teenager got a fish bone stuck in his tonsil.
Oh my God!
Have you ever had that? And,
no, I don't have tonsils anymore. But
okay, yeah. But so he's like hacking away and kind of like trying to clear it, and he's all kind of freaking out. And
oh my God!
And so I'm thinking, oh gosh, if I can solve this for him, then I'll just be like the most awesome dad and an okay doctor. Kind of like Dr. Bob. Don't fail your own family now. So I kind of was trying to look at his tonsil, and he's going like, and I'm trying to shine a flashlight in there and trying to see it. And finally I see it. It's tiny. It's like tiny back there, but he keeps trying to clear his throat, trying to get it out. So we go down to the office, Cheryl, and he and I drive down to the office because they have these really long tweezers. It's like this really, really long. You stick it all the way back to your throat. And he kept saying, "Dad, it's okay if you want me to go to an urgent care and have like someone there take it out." And I kept thinking, no,
you don't have to solve everything.
No, but I'm thinking, no, I got this. I really want to be able to do this because I mean, it's like the one time he needs me, as a doctor. I want to try to do this. So yeah, he just, we were in the office. I had my headlamp on, like old fashioned doctors, a little headlamp coming off my forehead and shining down his throat. And I took their little alligator forceps and I stuck him into the back, all the way back in his throat, tonsil, and one little try. I grabbed it and pulled it out, and I was the hero. So I
knew the story was going to come back to somehow you being a hero. I knew it wasn't just about selfless service.
No, it's not that I need to ever be a hero, but I guess like the one time
but you'll talk about it if you are. Right. You're gonna at least talk about it.
The one time my child needs me,
That's
to
funny.
do something medical, and I'm like, I'm just like, I got to step up and I don't know, it's kind of.
Well, at least you didn't freeze in that moment. That's good, because that's my biggest fear is something happening in a moment and sort of freezing in panic. And in those important, crucial seconds make a difference in whether or not there's a positive outcome.
Well, I first tried to deny that he even had a fish bone stuck. I'm like, oh, no, you're fine. Don't worry about it.
Just cough.
Oh, yeah, just gargle some water or something. And so, yeah, like any good parent, if you can pretend like it's not a problem, it'll just go away, right?
Turning blue. He kind of like,
but no, it didn't. Anyway, so that was kind of I just felt like a real doctor, for, just because I was able to handle emergency with my own.
Are you a real doctor?
I am. But a lot of
God.
stuff in the office is kind of routine. And so when I kind of get to solve an actual emergency.
You felt like you were a doctor on a TV show. That's what you felt like.
Because I'm like, oh, we got to get to the office stat. And so I'm like, Cheryl, alligator forceps. And I hand it in my hand. And
Scalpel.
Yeah, she puts. So yeah, it was, and I had the headlamp. I never get to use the headlamp in the office, and so
funny.
It was
you
actually
enjoyed it. You got to be like the protagonist. In the movie.
Well, like the ER or the Grey's Anatomy theme song was like playing in my head the whole time as I'm doing it. And
that is hilarious.
Anyway, so that's my medical story. Kind of a little more exciting than your medical story.
Please.
Anyway,
from the other episode.
Well, anyway, welcome everyone. I guess back to the vaccine conversation, and today's what are we talking about again? I forget.
Meningococcal.
Oh yeah. This is one of my episodes.
I've been messaged a lot about this particular vaccine for people that do have concerns. So I told you we were going to get to. We're going to cover every single disease on the CDC recommended schedule, just so you guys know.
Right.
Yeah, eventually.
Right.
We've covered a handful already. We're going to get through all of them. Don't worry.
Right.
Before we get into this super exciting information, I thought we could go through a couple of our awesome reviews that we've gotten on iTunes. We've had over 400 ratings, which is...
I know, we just passed 400. I feel like it was like
406.
150 like a month ago.
Just yesterday.
Yeah.
In fact.
Yeah, it's like
People
gone
move
way,
so
way
fast.
up. Yeah.
And I've decided I'm going to read these in an English accent. We'll see how well I can keep it up. Maybe you can read one like in a Southern accent. We can go back and forth. Okay. So this one says... well, actually, I can't read the whole title. That's weird. But it says great scientific base vaccine, blah. I don't know the rest. But it says, I have found this podcast to be very educational and evidence-based. Melissa and Dr. Bob have really done this research, and each has a breadth of knowledge in the area. I really appreciate the different perspectives as a parent and medical professional. The information presented is informative, practical, and engaging. Whether you consider yourself pro or anti-vaccine, this is definitely worth a listen because the information on the individual diseases and vaccines is something everyone should know, and then we wouldn't have a society that was as fearful of these normal diseases. As both a parent and medical professional, I have found this podcast helpful and would highly recommend it. And here comes my favorite part. Also, Melissa, you go, girl. Your passion for the topic is something to be applauded, and everything you add is so helpful. So don't stop interrupting. Ding, 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 ding. Woo-hoo-hoo!
Oh my God. Thank you, Mary Poppins, for that wonderful
We have
review.
a winner. That's the best review I've ever read. I'm not biased. It's just the best review that we've ever had on the show. And so that is from J Mama. Okay. Are you going to read one that you're in a, do you have an accent?
Not in a Southern accent.
Oh, do you have any accents you can do?
I have a Southern accent. Okay. I mean, I grew up in the South. I lived in South Carolina for a number of years. So if I visit the South, that'll start to come out. But no, I don't. I'm not going to try to butcher it.
All right. Another one I want to read. I love this title, Inspiring. Isn't that great?
Yeah.
Inspiring. She says, when I became a young mom, it seemed as though I was indoctrinated to believe that unvaccinated children would cause the death of my own time. And from the time my daughter took her first breath from the NICU. I've always been one to be skeptical of not only pharmaceutical companies, but our government's hold on its citizens and how it's implemented through propaganda, legislation, and more. And that's definitely what we're dealing with right now. She said, following a vaccine reaction my daughter had at 4 months, I was told I was crazy. What happened to her was normal, and that I was the uneducated and naive one. I know that story so far too well. It's been hard to get more people my age to understand the risks of vaccines and why I have since chosen to make my informed choices instead of going with the social norm. There have been countless nights I've stayed up wondering if I'm doing the right thing, wondering why this happened to her. Thank you, Dr. Bob and Melissa, for fighting the good fight and bringing more light to this topic. I appreciate it more than you'll ever know. Sabrina from New Jersey.
Yeah, thanks, Sabrina.
I love that.
That was cool.
Well,
here's one that actually is in a Southern accent, so maybe I could give it a try.
Do it.
It's Amber, and we are off the hook. Amazing.
Nice.
According to Amber. I just love y'all. I need to be sleeping, but can't.
You keep doing it.
But can't stop. Won't listening.
What?
I don't know. Keep bringing the knowledge. Thank you for all you do and all the hard work.
She's saying, I can't stop, won't stop listening.
Okay.
Like that. I can't stop, won't stop. Nope.
I can't read English, I guess. And all the hard work and time y'all put into everything. Okay.
You can't have a Southern accent only on one word and then go back to like a regular accent. What was that?
I told you I couldn't do it. Anyway.
What was that? I'll try a Southern accent on this one. I want to.
Well, we'll just wait. We'll just wait till you find it.
Yeah, it's totally fine. Yeah. You guys. Okay, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. Oh, I love it. Thank you both for doing this podcast. I find it to be one of the most informative and science-based discussions I've ever listened to on this topic and the topic of immunology. As an RN, I was schooled in the ways of Western medicine. As a mother, none of those ways felt right in my gut for my family. So I've always sought out holistic information and tried to apply it as I've raised my children, much to the dismay of my fellow RNs and my own mother. I've always known that the human body is capable of truly amazing things when given the natural opportunity to heal or fight disease. Your discussion with Dr. Cowan has me so excited for part 2, and I can't wait to dive into his books. Thank you both again. I see.
Thank you, Scarlett.
You're welcome. You're welcome, Doctor.
Oh my gosh.
This is fun. We can read reviews for an entire episode just in different voices.
Yeah, we could.
Oh my God.
I can do French. I got a good French accent.
At least give us a taste of that one.
No.
Please, come on.
I actually.
Come on. You
can. Oui. No, that's my French accent. I just do that.
It's only French if you add.
Like this is from Monica. I listen every day.
Now it's French.
I love you guys. Oui. You are hilarious, and I love the information.
Merci. Oh my God, that's not a French accent. That's called including French words. It's not the same thing.
Okay.
But anyway, there's so many great reviews. We could probably go through this the entire time, and I think we will. No, just kidding.
I needed that because this is a disease episode. It's going to be a nice boring discussion about meningococcal disease. And,
we'll see if Scarlett or Mary show up again later in this episode.
I hope they don't. Anyway,
stop censoring me. Okay, knock it off.
So meningococcal disease, everybody. This is the type of meningitis that you hear about that goes around college campuses, right? If there's an outbreak of meningitis, it'll be, in a college campus. It is typically meningococcal disease. Now, there are actually lots of different causes of meningitis. There's Hib meningitis that we vaccinate against. There's pneumococcal meningitis. We already did an episode on. There's people can get meningitis from fungus infections. You can get meningitis from viruses. In fact, the most common cause of meningitis is probably viral meningitis, where you usually are not harmed much by it, but you feel like you have meningitis.
You're saying compared to bacterial meningitis.
Right, compared to bacterial meningitis. Right. So meningococcal is a form of bacteria meningitis. It's caused by the Neisseria meningitidis bacteria. That's the Latin name for the bacteria. And there are actually, I didn't write on here, but there are actually 13 different serotypes of meningococcal bacteria, 13 different kinds. And we basically have vaccines against 5 of those kinds. So that means there are, what's left? 13 minus 5, 8. There are 8 kinds of Melissa smiled at my
Leave the math to me, buddy.
Well, I was looking at you. What's 13 minus 8? And I could see you looking all confused.
You get to be the doctor, okay?
So we have vaccines to protect us against 5 serotypes of meningococcal disease, but you can still catch meningococcal disease even if you are vaccinated because there are a lot of serotypes not covered by the vaccine. So what's challenging about this bacteria is that at least 10% of people carry this bacteria in their nose. It literally is living in your nasal passage or your throat. About 10% of people. Mostly teens and young adults will have this carrying in their nose. Some children will, but it often doesn't get there until you're older. And it's harmless. I mean, it sits there harmlessly. It just lives for years and years and doesn't bother us at all. And some people even say, 20% or even 40% of people will carry this in their nose. So it's very interesting. It's often not something that you are then going to catch it from someone else and get sick. It's often that your meningococcal infection comes from your own bacteria living in your nose, and then through certain factors happen, and then it invades and causes meningitis. And that's kind of one of the big problems we have in medicine. No one's figured out why that happens.
Ask that.
Yeah, like what why does it happen to you and not these 100 other people? They think there's some sort of genetic factors or immune factors that make your body unable to contain it. Yet your body will contain it there for years. It'll live there for years harmlessly.
I mean, could it be stress related? Could it be things that change the environment and all of a sudden they cause something that's harmless to become invasive? Yeah.
Again, we don't know. And if someone could solve that, then that would go a long way to helping keep people, protect people from this disease. So how do you know if you catch meningitis or meningococcal meningitis? It's basically you get very high fever. You feel you basically feel like flu-like. Severe headache. The lights hurt your eyes. The back of your neck hurts. So you can't even look down because the back of your neck is so sore. You very stiff neck. You can feel super tired and achy and just feel super miserable. The problem is the flu can make you feel that way as well. So it's a real challenge to identify early because
except for the neck thing, which is unique, almost more unique to this.
Yeah, you're right. Well, the neck symptoms are unique to meningitis.
Right.
So basically, you'll feel flu-like and feel very severely ill, but if you have the neck symptoms, the back of your neck hurts, that's when you know it could be any kind of meningitis. Mm-hmm. And it actually comes on pretty quickly. I mean, you can go from like mildly sick to like severely ill, like really deathly ill, like within 24 hours. You can just go downhill really quick. So, but what really brings out the idea that it is this particular bacteria is you will get what's called petechiae spots or petechiae rash. I'm not going to try to spell it, but it's petechiae. It's a Latin word that basically looks as if someone has taken a red felt tip pen and just dotted your skin all over, just little tiny red pinpoint dots. And then those dots can actually kind of coalesce and form big red splotches. Or
in one
red,
area.
In one area, or a variety of areas.
It's not universally distributed around the body. It would be like in patches.
You're right. It's usually in like on your hands and feet, or kind of the middle of your body. It can be everywhere, or just one extremity, and they can be reddish. They can be purplish, and if there's kind of one take home message from this podcast is, of course, everyone's now looking at their hands and feet and kind of looking for red dots. Of course, we all have little red dots on us.
But that's with flu-like symptoms.
Right. But what makes a difference is if you have a rash, like flu-like symptoms, and you have a rash, if you stretch your skin on your red dots and your red dot disappears, then that's not a petechiae rash. That's not a meningococcal rash. The meningococcal petechiae basically don't disappear when you stretch the skin, or they don't blanch. Mm-hmm. They're like embedded in your skin, almost like a tattoo would be embedded. So you stretch your skin and it stays red. If you stretch your skin and the red area kind of disappears and turns white or skin colored, then you know it's not petechiae and you don't have to stress. But you see that petechiae rash, and you have all these other symptoms, that's very serious. And you should never take that lightly. You should be immediately, at an emergency room or at a doctor and getting evaluated. Now, the other situation where you can get petechiae that might not be a concern is if you have a very bad cough. If you have like really severe coughing or you're vomiting, and you get petechiae on your face because of all the pressure in your head from vomiting or coughing, and you get petechiae only in your face, we'll see this a lot in those cases, then that's not something you would tend to worry about or consider an emergency. If you have meningococcal disease and you're going to get petechiae, it's not just going to be on your face, it's going to be usually on your extremities. So that's really the hallmark of this disease.
And the rash would come after some other symptoms? It wouldn't come before?
It wouldn't come first, correctly.
So if you have no symptoms and all of a sudden you're seeing a rash that looks like this, it wouldn't be from this bacteria?
Correct. Yeah, if you have no fever, you feel fine, but you have petechiae, then there are like certain kind of like bleeding disorders. Like you're suddenly now kind of like have like really thin blood or
so that would come
easily.
Post this like very strong feeling of sickness, of illness.
Right.
That you're
If it's
having.
going to be meningococcal disease.
Okay.
Right. So okay, you're basically then you're at a doctor. So it's not a very contagious disease, but basically if you're exposed to someone who has this disease, the incubation period is usually 3 to 4 days, meaning it'll take you about 3 to 4 days to feel sick. But it can be as short as 2 days, as long as 10 days. It can take you quite a while to feel sick. So kind of where this sort of fits into, I think, the college discussion is the issue of a contagious disease, people living in close quarters in dormitories. You have like 3 roommates. This also tends to occur in military barracks where people are like living in close quarters. If someone in close quarters environments has meningococcal disease, it's not going to spread like measles. It's not going to spread like chickenpox. You're not just going to get it by being in the same room with somebody. There has to actually be some pretty intimate contact, sharing saliva, kissing, sharing a toothbrush. Who does that? But, sharing like a water bottle, sleeping in the same bed together. I mean, if you're kind of like really kind of, have a lot of prolonged intimate contact with these roommates, that's where this disease can spread. If you're walking down a hallway of a school and you're feeling sick and contagious for meningococcal disease, you're not spreading it to everybody you're passing. So that's kind of in our favor. That's why we don't have meningococcal outbreaks, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. That's why we don't have big outbreaks of this disease, because it's not contagious. The good news is if you are exposed, with close intimate contact, you can take an antibiotic. You take oral antibiotics, and it'll neutralize the germs in your system, so then you don't become sick.
Sooner the better, though. This is one of those things
The
that
sooner
has
the
to
better,
be
yeah.
right away.
Yeah. So they will treat contacts of a person with this disease. What's interesting, if you look at CDC data and you look at their website on meningococcal disease, they actually say only about 3% of cases are because of a college outbreak. And when we have college outbreaks, it's only like 2 or 3 cases.
And you're still talking about just specifically bacterial meningitis.
Right, bacterial, not just bacterial meningitis, but meningococcal bacterial meningitis, just that one
Which
form
means 97% of the cases are not coming from outbreaks.
Like an outbreak in college, right. And I'll get ahead of myself, but no, I won't. I'll save it for later. But what you hear as far as like the narrative and mandatory vaccine conversations, you always hear, colleges have now mandated this vaccine because they want to prevent outbreaks. They don't want meningitis to, spread all over campuses. Well, it doesn't spread all over campuses because it's not a very contagious disease. So it's not something that's going to spread through a college. And, vaccine status in a college actually doesn't matter for this disease because it's just not contagious enough. And so,
for a mandate.
Right, for a mandate. Yet a lot of colleges actually have started mandating. In fact, most colleges actually mandate this vaccine now, even though an extreme minority of these cases are actually caught as a very small college outbreak. The vast majority of cases are only 1 case at a time, 1 case in a family, 1 case in a school, 1 case in any given county. And we don't even know who they caught it from. They probably caught it from their own germs. So we're fortunate. We don't see tons of this disease. So what is it going to be like if you have this disease? Well, interestingly, and I didn't even know this before until I actually read about this, about 10% of cases of this disease are actually very mild. You actually kind of like barely even feel sick. So there are actually such things as mild cases of meningococcal disease. In fact, you don't even know you have meningococcal disease if you're one of those 10% because you're not even going to the doctor because you barely even feel sick.
And I just want to point out, this is not the same thing as viral meningitis, which is usually not complicated for most people, right? We're still talking about the serious type of meningococcal.
Right.
And you're saying 10% of the serious type is still not something that's causing...
Right, there's something about your immune system that creates a mild course of illness. But again, we're not even identifying those cases because they're
because you wouldn't be
mild.
seeking medical treatment.
Right. Or you're part of a known exposure, but then you'd be getting antibiotics. So anyway, so basically, and I'd say there's really not a moderate course of this disease. It's pretty much either mild or extremely severe, very severe. I mean, it's a really tough disease. I mean, they basically, excuse me, the bacteria go into your bloodstream, they overwhelm your system, you get septic, you go into septic shock, and you basically lose blood flow to your extremities. You're in an ICU, you're on maybe life support. It can be very, very serious. It's a terrible disease. And I've never seen cases of this disease, but it's terrible to watch. And this is basically the type of meningitis where you might lose a foot or lose a hand or lose an arm because the blood flow just shuts down. You lose all oxygenation to that arm. And they actually think, I forget if I have the data on this sheet, but something like 10% of people who catch this disease will have such a severe case that you'll literally lose a limb. You'll lose a limb over this. They think about 10% of cases, which is a very high complication rate. And what do they say? It has about a 10 to 20% fatality rate from this disease. So a number of people are actually going to die from this disease.
Do we have how many people die? I don't have.
Yeah, I'll give you disease stats, but basically sort of just trying to picture what it's like to catch this disease. You're in an ICU, you're on IV fluids, life support, hefty antibiotics. Again, 10 to 20% fatality, and if you do survive, you might lose a limb. The majority of people do survive, though.
Well, I have here I do have the cases, but it doesn't show, even the CDC on their Appendix E is not showing deaths from meningococcal. God, why do I want to call this meningococcal?
I know. So yeah, okay. Back to the discussion. I know a lot, people want to call it meningococcal, but just think meningitis. Meningococcal, I guess what you call it. Again, about 10% of cases are fatal, and but here's the thing: for college cases, very interestingly, for college kids, a higher percentage are fatal. About 20% of college cases are fatal, but about 10% of overall cases are fatal. So again, there's no such, it's a terrible disease to catch. And now let's talk about the data. And I think, we scare you with this horrible disease until you know how bad this disease can be. We're fortunate that it is extremely rare. It's an extremely rare disease. You don't have to sit there and live kind of like in fear of this disease. And basically, I have the data here. Historically, we had many thousands of cases of this disease in recent decades, and I'll tell you what we have here. Excuse me. They used to, right now we've kind of had between like 1,500 and 3,000 cases every year in our country. 1,500.
You said we used to.
Well, we used to. 1,500 to 3,000 cases every year, and that was maybe like a decade ago, and 20, 30 years ago we had more than that. And even without using a vaccine, we saw this disease decline. Like several other diseases that we've seen over time. Right. And no one's exactly really sure why there's been this decline. I mean, it might be recognizing it or being aware of it and kind of containing, when there is a case, containing outbreaks better. But there's quite a big decline in this disease. But recently, when did we start using this vaccine? We started using this vaccine around 2005. Yeah, 2005. Now there's been an even greater decrease. In 2015, we only had about 360 cases total.
That's including both the B strain and the other strains.
That's including all the strains. Mm-hmm. We only had about 360 cases total in 2015, and I believe all the other years you have some annual data. Is it looking?
Well, this is the CDC. The CDC actually says 231 cases from their Appendix E between the two strains in 2015. 231
Okay,
cases.
between the two strains.
Between the
right.
two strains.
Okay, right, interesting.
So even
right.
less than what you said.
Okay, all right.
From what they reported.
Right, so now, I mean, it used to be, thousands, and it was like, 2,000-3,000. Now we only have a few hundred cases of this disease in our country every year. So it's a disease that I guess, even though it's terrible, fortunately it's extremely rare. If you think of, there are 350 million some Americans, and only about 350 cases. What's the
or even less
what's
than
the
that.
math on that? That's one case per many millions of people in our country. We have about 50 deaths. All right, very tragically, about 50 people die from this disease every year in our country. Most of the deaths are in the adults and the elderly. We have very few deaths in children and teens. Now, this is a vaccine, I guess, to put it in perspective. We only give this vaccine right now to teenagers. It is only on the teenage schedule. Yes, this disease exists in babies. This disease exists in young children, and this disease is in adults and elderly. But for interesting reasons, I don't really understand all the reasons, they've only targeted teenagers with this vaccine. And probably one of the reasons has to do with the strains. There are 5 strains we have vaccines for, and there are 2 kinds of vaccines. One vaccine, the one we give teenagers, targets the A, C, Y, and W strains. And that's the one we give everyone when they're 12 and when they're 16 years of age, because that's the strain that goes around in college. The B strain of the disease is what we see mostly in young kids. We don't often see the A, C, Y, and W strain in young kids. It's often the B. The problem with this vaccine is they can't get a B strain vaccine to work in young children. If they could get one to work, they would use it. We would make it, we would use it, and then everyone would get it. But for some reason, when you give a B strain vaccine, and that's the strain, again, that goes around in young children, they just don't respond to it. So there's no good way to protect young kids from this, from the B strain that goes around. And we don't bother giving like an ACYW strain in America to kids because those strains don't really go around in young kids. Let's see.
I find this so weird that even the Appendix E, they don't list all the deaths are NA. No availability of deaths all the way from 2006 to 2016. Not at all, which I think is weird. That information isn't along with all the other vaccine preventable deaths.
Yeah, but when we look at infants and toddlers, again, if they could make a vaccine that would work, they would use it. There are about 100 type B cases in babies and toddlers every year in our country, and about 5 deaths. So again, do you have to sit there as a parent, shaking and living in fear of this disease? No, you don't, because it's an extremely rare disease. It's unlikely your child will ever be exposed. Your child could even be one of the kids that carries it in their nose. You yourself as an adult could be carrying it in your nose. That doesn't make you more at risk of catching the disease. It doesn't make you more at risk of spreading it to others. We don't like do nasal swab testing of people to see if they're carrying it because, again, there's nothing we can do about it. But
I find a couple of these stories of younger people with the flu also having meningitis and dying from meningitis. Right. There seems to be some kind of connection between a death from meningitis being also connected to influenza in the body, the flu in the body. I wonder if there's a level of, immune system activity that basically just causes it to take over. I have seen that story several times. Of the combination of those two working together basically to cause a bad outcome.
Right.
Which I think is interesting.
Right. And I didn't say this earlier, but when someone dies of meningococcal disease, they know it because they find it very easily on blood work. When you're in the hospital, in the ER with your rash and feeling very sick, they do blood work. They find the germs in there. So it's not like there's tons of cases out there that we don't know of, or it's not like someone's going to die, but they're not going to know as meningococcal disease. They're pretty much going to know. So again, this disease is so rare. I've never seen it. If you talk to an infectious disease specialist, or if you talk to an intensive care unit doctor, they're going to tell you the worst horror stories about this disease, because probably every one of them has seen at least one case of this disease in our country, because they're the ones caring for this disease. So it's again, I mean, I as a doctor, I feel, I guess, a sense of safety when I know some of these worst horrifying diseases are so rare that I may never see it in my entire career. And I'll know when I see it in the office, because I can find, I can look for the petechiae and to identify.
And this is not one of those ones that is so rare now simply because the vaccine is very new. It already becoming very rare already.
Exactly.
This is a good example of that.
Exactly. So I guess people would ask, does this vaccine prevent the spread of the disease? Is this a public health benefit vaccine? Like we've talked about, like the measles vaccine helps prevent the spread, but the polio vaccine doesn't. The whooping cough vaccine doesn't, and tetanus and diphtheria vaccines don't prevent the spread of disease. Well, for meningococcal vaccine, we kind of don't know. We don't know if it prevents the spread of the disease. They've never done research to show that it does prevent the spread, but we also don't have research that shows it doesn't, like we know with the other ones. So it's kind of unknown. I mean, we do know 10 or even 20, even 40% of people carry this germ in their nose, and getting the vaccine doesn't change that. Getting the vaccine doesn't eliminate the germs from your nasal passage. So kind of from that logic, it probably would not prevent the spread of the disease. But again, we don't know for sure, but it does basically give you bloodstream immunity, so that your own meningococcal germs are going to be less likely to spread into your body. Or if you catch someone else's meningococcal germs and you've had this vaccine, you will not. You'll have some immunities ready to fight off the germs, so you hopefully then won't get sick with meningococcal disease. I believe this is a vaccine that probably works. It does seem to work fairly well in that respect by individually protecting us. But again, we don't know that it's a public health measure. Is there
a reason why they don't give? They're giving this at the age of 12 for the first dose. You're saying because as teenagers, that's when they see these particular strains.
Right.
How many doses are they getting as infants? Of the other, they're not doing the B strain because that's only for immunocompromised or special circumstances. But for the other Hib and the pneumococcal meningitis, they're getting their 4.
Yeah, you get 4 doses of infant Hib and pneumococcal meningitis vaccines.
And then at 12, you'd be getting 1 dose, and then at 16, what's the reason for the booster at 16?
Yeah, that's kind of an interesting story. Thanks for asking, Melissa.
No problem.
I'll tell you the story. Like you said, we give this vaccine when you're 12 and when you're 16. So when this vaccine first came out, everyone got in 2005. They recommended a dose at age 12, so that you would then go into high school and then into college having immunities from the A, C, Y, and W strains of this disease, the strains that we see in colleges. It's almost like it wasn't so much needed in high school, but age 12 is kind of that benchmark where they give you your teenage boosters of vaccines.
Because you're there for Tdap anyway.
You're there, yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're not at the doctor when you're 16 or 18, so let's give it to you when you're 12. Well, what they discovered is that 1 dose at 12 was wearing off by the time you're like 15 or 16 or 18. By the time you get to college, that 12-year-old dose wasn't doing most people any good. It's wearing off, actually, in the majority of people. So what they did, instead of moving that dose to 16 or moving that dose to college entry, they put on a second dose. They voted
but
for
it doesn't need a second dose as far as creating immunity to be sufficient. It's like, how they say about measles, the first dose is 93%, and that second dose gets that extra 7%. Is it one of those circumstances?
No. It's more that a lot of people's is worn off by the time you're 16 or 17.
So why not
let's give you another dose to cover you through college.
Is there a risk between 12 and 16 that's great enough to...
Small risk. The number of cases of meningococcal disease, from 12 to 16 is much smaller than the group of kids who are 16 to 20. Those later high school and those college age kids. That's where we see most of a big upswing in meningococcal disease. Again, it's because of the close quarters, the intimate contact. It's the
Living
later
together,
high schools that are, they're dating, they're kissing, they're sharing food, and then in college. So that's where we're seeing the disease. So anyway, they voted to add a second dose, and this is kind of the interesting story you sort of, without knowing it, asked for. The ACIP, again, which is it's the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, they're the ones that decide on vaccine policy. They're the ones that decided to add the second dose. And I saw like a summary of the meeting, of the ACIP meeting. And they actually talked about, do we move the dose from 12 to 16? Do we add a second dose? Do we not add a second dose? And basically, was interesting there, 11, there are 14 people at that ACIP meeting who were making this decision. Only 6 of them voted to add the second dose. Only 6 of them. So less than half actually voted to add the second dose. 5 of them voted no, let's not add a second dose. And 3 of them abstained from the vote.
Do we know what year this was?
This was in 2009 or 10 or 11. 2011, I believe. So maybe 7 or 8 years ago. But think about what that means. Your ACIP, when they make vaccine policy, it's usually kind of like a majority of people vote for something. And they kind of like it's a consensus. They all agree. Yeah, if this vaccine is going to be so good, all the scientists on the ACIP committee, you think they'd agree and vote for it. But no, only 6 of them wanted to add the second dose. 5 didn't, and I don't know why 3 abstained. Maybe they abstained so that the vote could go through. I don't know, but that second dose just barely passed the ACIP.
But didn't we saw that in 277? There were assembly members who abstained, which was like saying no, because everybody was supposed to, on the Democratic side, at least vote party line. And so sometimes you do see people abstaining because they're not wanting to give support, but they know they're not supposed to be giving a nay vote. And so they keep it neutral, but in reality, it's not helping anybody because they made sure it passed.
Right. So then but what they also allowed is if you're a high school parent and your kid's 12 years old and you decide you don't want them to get the meningococcal vaccine, but then you do want to get a dose later for college, if you get 1 dose at age 16, they found that 1 dose works just as well as if you had gotten both doses. So, and you don't need 2 doses. You only need the 1 dose for age 16 and older, and then you're covered for college.
So how does that work? At 12, for some reason, it wanes, and then when you're 16, somehow...
No, 16, it wanes also, but it's going to last you those 4 or 5 years through college.
But then what happens?
Well, then they feel like you don't need it after college.
But what if you do? People have relationships after that. You're having close contact with people.
I know. I think they just took a target age group where they see the majority of these disease cases. And there's basically 2 age groups where we see a lot of the cases. Infancy, but we have no vaccine to cover that age. And then it's very low after infancy, and then then there's a big upswing in the later high school, college age. They're just targeting where the groups that they saw where it happens.
I want to know how they decide how long the immunity might last. Is that literally just post-marketing research? Like, let's put this out there and we'll start seeing these diseases come back. And so we realize, this wanes. Let's add another dose. Yeah. Or is there a way scientifically, because they're not studying this for enough years to be able to tell?
I know they used to. Yeah. You know what? That is a great question. I don't know the answer how long they studied this.
Are they using animal models and they're like hypothesizing the amount of time that they see because of lifespan? Maybe. Because otherwise I feel like this is always just a guess. Like, we're going to give you this dose. We found out, oh my God, guess what? It totally didn't protect you and you actually got it anyway. And you're one of those cases that got this terrible thing even though you were vaccinated. Shoot, I guess we should add another dose. Like, that just seems not the smartest way to go about this.
Yeah, and I don't know how they go about that. That'd be an interesting question. I know someone who probably does know, but okay. So I also will say, everyone's talking about, I heard there is a meningococcal vaccine for babies, or I heard there's a meningococcal vaccine for adults, and my doctor advised me to give my kid a meningococcal vaccine. Where you can, the meningococcal vaccines are indicated for certain people with a very narrow set of types of severe immunodeficiency syndromes, people who are severely immunocompromised. if you're a baby and you have certain severe immune deficiency, or you're say a 5-year-old with severe immune deficiency, or an adult with one, these meningococcal vaccines are also indicated for you, including the type B. The type B vaccine that doesn't work on babies.
So you get both.
You can actually get both, even though they know it doesn't work very well. They're so concerned about your immunodeficient child catching meningococcal disease that they'll advise the type B vaccine and the ACYW vaccine, even for babies or young kids or elderly. So there are some select groups outside the teenage groups that these are approved for.
But it's not on the routine schedule.
It's not on the routine schedule, so I typically don't talk much about it. I really just talk about what is on the routine schedule. It's the 4-strain ACYW vaccine that we give when you're 12 and when you're 16, so it covers you through those ages. Siri.
Siri just got turned on. That's hilarious.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. I said the name of vaccine, but I didn't say Siri. And Siri wants to give me information. We should see what Siri wants to tell me about
whatever it is, Facebook will allow it, because Siri will be programmed to make sure the information is.
Well, that's even weird. My Facebook's even on silent, but
that is so weird.
Okay, anyway, thank you, Siri. So what are the ingredients of this vaccine? We like to kind of share some of these details. I guess this is not a live vaccine. It is not live, so you can't catch meningitis from this vaccine. And the two brands they make, what are they called? I forget. Oh yeah, Menactra and Menvio. Menactra and Menvio. Those are the two brands of this 4-strain vaccine. You'll hear about other brands, but those are the type B strain vaccines that are only for immunocompromised people. Okay, so basically what they do is they grow these germs in the laboratory in petri dishes. They got these germs from infected people, and then they grow them in petri dishes. They break up the germs and they take out the sugars from the germs, and then they deactivate the solution with formaldehyde, and then they take diphtheria bacteria and mix it with the germ sugars, with the meningococcal germ sugars. So it kind of makes a diphtheria toxin meningococcal sugar kind of solution, makes it like a mix of that. And then they kind of mix it with saline, and then there's some formaldehyde in it because they needed formaldehyde to kind of kill off any germs that were remaining and to neutralize the diphtheria toxin. So basically, this is kind of one of the most pure vaccines. There's not a lot of strange ingredients. You have the diphtheria toxin, the meningococcal sugars, you have saline, and you have formaldehyde. There's no mercury, there's no aluminum, there's no fetal tissues that I know of anyway. There's not a lot of strange ingredients. And so it's a killed vaccine. And then, you get the vaccine and the diphtheria toxin helps your body react. It's kind of like an adjuvant to help your body react to the meningococcal sugars that are in the vaccine. So then you will create immunity. So it's kind of made in the very classic style that they make vaccines. And again, so when you're looking at this vaccine and you're trying to decide whether or not you should get this vaccine, I guess number one, the amount of formaldehyde is way lower than some of the other vaccines. It's like 2.6 micrograms, whereas some of the other vaccines have like 100 micrograms of formaldehyde. So this is not a vaccine that I think you really need to be scared about ingredients or worried about ingredients, because again, it's one of the most purely made ones. But then I think you have to look at side effects, and I think this is a vaccine that you do need to consider the side effect profile, because there are some concerns about side effects, unfortunately. And I wish there wasn't, because, again, it's a terrible disease. So side effects, of course, a lot of people will get achy and feverish and feel like, flu-like. The main issue with severe reactions is Guillain-Barré syndrome. It's a French word, Guillain-Barré. It's a type of temporary paralysis or muscle weakness. It's an autoimmune reaction. And we've talked about autoimmune disease, but basically, as your immune system is attacking the meningococcal sugars and diphtheria toxin in the vaccine, your immune system turns against yourself and attacks part of your spinal cord or your brain and basically makes you feel paralyzed to either mildly, moderately, or severely. People with severe Guillain-Barré have to go on life support. And then people with mild Guillain-Barré will just kind of like have a limp or kind of feel very weak and be sort of like bedridden for some weeks, while the whole process runs its course, and you recover and survive. And people rarely die from Guillain-Barré, but the reason why this reaction is highlighted is in the first 2 years of the use of this vaccine. In the United States, where they had basically given out about 15 million doses of this vaccine, nationwide. There are 26 cases of Guillain-Barré syndrome reported through the VAERS system, and that was a big red flag. That was kind of like a big jump. They wouldn't have expected that many cases to be reported. 26 cases out of 15 million doses sold. But they didn't know how many were given. Those are just how many doses were sold. So that kind of created a red flag. We've seen Guillain-Barré after the flu vaccine. We've seen Guillain-Barré syndrome with other vaccines. But they basically kind of had to add it as a warning that there's a potential for an increased risk of Guillain-Barré syndrome after these vaccines. Now, they've continued to study this phenomenon, and of course, you can imagine kind of the mainstream medical conclusion is that, no, there's no proven link between, meningococcal vaccine and Guillain-Barré syndrome. But it does have a higher risk than most other vaccines. The flu vaccine and meningococcal vaccine both have higher, kind of like the two with the highest risk of Guillain-Barré syndrome. Compared to most other vaccines. So that's kind of the main severe side effects. Of course, there's other severe side effects. They have severe allergic reactions, fainting. They've actually seen facial nerve dysfunctions where you can't like move part of your face because the nerves get inflamed. They've seen other types of spinal cord problems, encephalitis. So there's been a number of other neurological reactions to this vaccine. So I have this question.
If this is one of the vaccines that as a parent you say, I think this one is important because there's a risk. My child's going to be older. The ingredients are more pure. And maybe you say, I'm just, I like the idea of just one dose. This makes sense to me. If your child's already at that 20-year-old mark, when is the point that or you're a young adult, where is that point that you would say to yourself, this really isn't necessary anymore? Because if they're giving a second dose at 16 and that immunity is going to wane in perhaps less than 4 years or 4 years' time, which means you would be unprotected by the time you're 20 at that point.
Right.
So young adults that are 20 and older, would there be a benefit to getting that vaccine then, or an adult at this point?
There is an age. I can look up the age. While we're talking, there is an age where it's no longer indicated. I forget that age. There is an age where you're not supposed to give it. But no, I would say. Again,
as a parent, is that something you should be concerned with for yourself?
Well, no. Well, I guess it's not a recommended vaccine just for the average parent, for the average adult. It's just not on that schedule. It's allowed. You can give it to certain age groups, but
is that because
it's not recommended just because
the data they don't have?
Just because the disease, it's just a rare disease in adults. Again, it's babies and it's the older teenagers. All the other age groups is extremely rare.
So does that mean essentially only if your child is between 16 and 20 that it's something that you would consider, and you would only need one dose at that point? Because the 12 to 16 is also rare?
Right, although it's rarer, but again, a 13-year-old could catch it, a 14-year-old could catch this disease. So I think my thought would be if you don't get the vaccine during the target years, then why bother?
Well, that's what I'm wondering.
Why get it when you're 20? You really needed it when you were 17, 18, 19. So should you go get it when you're 20? I'd say you kind of missed the boat on it. Get it. Yeah, if you and your doctor talk about it and decide it would be a good idea, but you kind of missed the boat, I would say.
Because the risk for it is during a certain peak of time.
Right. So I think it kind of comes down to, as a parent, knowing again, like what were some of the data, the vaccine risk versus the disease risk. I think it kind of comes down to that. Again, we have about 50 cases each year among high school and college age kids. I don't think I gave you that data point earlier. Again, if you look at all cases in the last few years, we have 200, 300, maybe 400 cases a year in all age groups nationwide with about 50 deaths. But when you're only looking at your teenagers' risk, because that's when you give the vaccine, so that's really the number of cases you should be looking at as far as risk.
That seems ironic, though. Only 50 cases a year in high school and college. If there are 250 or 300 cases a year, who else is getting it that's getting it more frequently? Shouldn't they be?
Well, no, it's not that they're getting more frequently. It's spread out through 80 years of the rest of our population.
Yeah.
So it's really low out of the rest of the 80 years of people's lives.
But those are people that are not recommended to get.
Right. They're not recommended.
I mean, that just is ironic to me.
Again, so we have so if you're looking at your high school or your college kid, 50 cases each year in high school kids and college age kids nowadays, 50 cases. So what is the likelihood that your child is going to be, if you think of, there's about like 16 million college age kids in our country every year. There's about 4 million per year, and it's about 16 million college age, if you want to look at it that way. 50 of those are going to catch, meningococcal meningitis, and 10 of them are going to die. And the ones that don't die, they might have like brain injury or lose a limb, another 10 or so. So is your child going to be one of those, 10 that die, 10 that lose a limb, or the 50 that catch that disease? That's kind of what you have to look at. As if you're deciding, whether or not to get this vaccine.
Do we see any kind of markers about immune system strength in the kids, the teenagers that do get it? Is there?
Not that I know of. Not that I tried to look kind of for that information. Why do some catch it? And unless you have like a severe immune deficiency disorder, they have not identified some other things. So then what's a vaccine risk? We don't actually know what the risk of Guillain-Barré syndrome from this vaccine is. I mean, we know there were about 26 VAERS reports in the first 2 years of this vaccine. But let's look at all the other VAERS data, though, because we have VAERS data not just on Guillain-Barré syndrome, but on all types of vaccines and injuries. So basically, as of, let me tell you VAERS data. So basically, as of last August, since they've been collecting VAERS data, there have been 3,500 serious reactions from meningococcal vaccine in the United States. 3,500. Things that cause hospitalizations, severe injuries, permanent disabilities, or death. 3,500 in VAERS. And we know from research that we think about 1% of VAERS reports are reported, or maybe 10%. So out of what's reported, it's 3,500 serious reactions, but it could be times 10, which would be 30,000, or it could be times 100, which would be 350,000. Anyway, it's many thousands of severe reactions to this vaccine, and you compare that to about 50 cases a year. There are actually now more severe reactions to this vaccine than there are severe cases of the disease among the target age group. Because we've only been using this vaccine since 2005. Right. So that's 13 years of VAERS data, 3,500 severe cases. That's 250, 300 severe reactions every year to the vaccine compared to 50 cases of the disease every year.
You wouldn't even count that first year because it probably takes a full year for data to really show. And so that's even in less.
It's so interesting. We have more severe reported reactions to the vaccine than we do the disease. I'm just talking about the data, and you can reach your own conclusions. But now there have been 170 fatal reactions to meningococcal vaccine reported to VAERS, 170 fatal reactions. Half of those are in kids under 6. So those would be in kids outside that target age group, kids who were maybe immunocompromised when they got the vaccine, or kids maybe part of, I don't know if they maybe had some other indications. I mean, one of the indications for this vaccine is HIV patients. And so maybe some of these are HIV kids, but 170 deaths reported from this vaccine. And if we have about 10 deaths a year from this disease among college-age kids, then you're looking at kind of maybe it's about an equal number of deaths from the disease compared to deaths from the vaccine, as far as what we're seeing reported.
But in different age groups.
Yeah, different age groups. I mean, 171 deaths, half of those are in kids under 6. That means half of those are in kids over 6. So a lot of those would be the teenagers or the young adults. So I guess if you're trying to compare disease risk versus vaccine risk, it almost seems like it's a wash. There is probably equal numbers of, if you just look at the data, maybe equal risk of a severe reaction as there is an equal risk of your child being severely harmed from this disease. And so what do you do with that information? Do you get the vaccine? Do you not? That's kind of, again,
I will
up to
say,
your
like,
doctor and
this,
you.
because this is seems to be a much more serious infection compared to something like chickenpox or something like even like measles. Or rotavirus. Like for me, this is definitely something that I would look into, like that I would think about, and weigh the possibilities, because your child being a teenager is definitely in a better position to handle a single dose compared to like the load of things that we're giving infants all at one time to add into what they're getting, and the fact that like you're saying, ingredients wise, it is more of a pure vaccine, more of a pure vaccine than others are. I can see why people struggle with this one. I've had a lot of moms and dads message me about this particular vaccine, and I can see why there is a struggle.
Yeah, and I don't know if we're since we're not answering the question for the listeners, I don't know if we're adding to your struggle or not. But Cheryl and I have discussed this, and she's kind of said, I mean, the worry is, if your kids are at home and they're severely ill, you're going to see that. If your kids are away at college in their dorm room, you're not there to say, oh my gosh, you look like you're, on death's door. We need to get you to the ER. And I think that's why a lot of parents probably do get this vaccine for their college age kids, because they're worried.
So do antibiotics work 100% of the time if caught early enough?
I mean, before you've gotten sick, if you're exposed to somebody and you take the oral antibiotics, you're very well protected.
But for somebody who gets the first signs of something, I need to go to the
hospital. And you have
petechiae,
and you're at the ER, you're very sick. Well, again, like I said, 10% will die. Among college-age kids, maybe 20% will die, and the other 10% will lose their limb.
Is there a chance that some of those didn't get treatment? Like they should have gone and...
So probably early treatment matters, but it doesn't always matter. Sometimes you're just so far, it just works so quickly
but you might have,
that...
Because you might have gone too late, right? Yeah, like that's part of it.
So yes, early treatment matters, but it's not a guarantee, that you're not going to die.
I mean, if your kid's at home, like you're saying, and you're able to see these things in advance if they're sick, then that would kind of lead more to getting the dose at 16, because that's going to at least get you through the college years when you're not going to be there. Yeah. And at least you've eliminated one dose and you've been able to still get the protection. But I mean, the girl that I read about dying from meningitis, recently was 23. So if she would have gotten the vaccine at 16 and that would have worn off, she didn't have protection from it anyway. Yeah. I mean, I wonder, if the immunity wanes, it's not like it's giving you're protected for the rest of your life. Like, so it is something
absolutely, for sure. This does wear off.
And that's something I think that factors in also.
But I also want to say what's interesting is, since a lot of people carry this bacteria in their nose, you actually get some natural immunity. They actually can find antibodies in your bloodstream from whatever strains are in your nose, which is interesting. You kind of create your own immunity. But you're right. I mean, the vaccine immunity does wear off. Pretty much all adults walking around either have some natural immunity from their own strains in their nose, but probably have no immunity to a lot of the strains going around. And if they got a vaccine, that definitely will have worn off as an adult, and you would not consider yourself having any vaccine-induced immunity.
I mean, gosh, it's too bad this didn't have like a 20-year, span and could keep you protected in one dose, that would make things easier.
I want to kind of maybe say a few things just so everyone doesn't freak out about this disease. That they actually have defined what's considered a contact of someone who has the disease, who around them should get the oral antibiotics, because you've been considered exposed. So basically, someone catches the disease, they identify it. Who is the public health department or the doctor is going to want to treat with oral antibiotics so that you don't get sick as well? It's basically household contacts even though you need intimate contact to spread the disease, they're basically going to
sharing a cup.
Yeah,
or something
yeah.
like
They're
that.
going to treat household contacts. They're going to treat childcare or preschool contacts anytime during the 7 days before you first got sick. So childcare or preschool, probably because there's more intimate contact between babies and childcare workers, like in a childcare or preschool setting. But they don't consider normal school, like elementary school or high school or college classroom contacts. They don't consider those people that they would treat, only if it goes around like in a daycare or a preschool. Direct exposure to the sick person's secretions, like through kissing or, like I said, close social contact anytime during the 7 days before they got sick. If you give mouth-to-mouth resuscitation to a really sick person, they'll want to treat you. That kind of goes without saying. If you frequently slept in the same house as a sick person, they want to treat you. And then if you were seated, this is interesting, seated directly next to the sick person during an airline flight, if it was lasting more than 8 hours, they want to treat you. So, again, they don't treat just casual contacts with no direct exposure to the person's oral secretions, like in school or just being at work with them. If you're a healthcare person, unless you came in contact with their oral secretions, they would not consider you something that needs to be treated. So, again, the bottom line is, again, it's let's summarize. It's a terrible disease. No one wants this disease. Thank God it's so rare. Mm-hmm. And also we can be thankful it is not very contagious. So we don't see outbreaks. Anytime there is one case, there's usually only one case in that location. If there's going to be an outbreak, it honestly might be 2 or 3 cases. So when you hear about it at a college,
measles.
When you hear about it at a college, there might be 1 kid there, or 2 kids there, or 3 kids there, and then there can be some very severe neurological reactions to the vaccine. They're not very common. Most people will probably do pretty well with this vaccine. But again, I would say overall your risk of having a severe reaction to the vaccine, looking at the data we have, that risk could be about equal to your risk of being one of those cases of the disease. And so what do you as the consumer do with that information? It's not a public health benefit vaccine, not that we know of. So you can't use a public health argument for this vaccine. It's really just your own individual choice. So there's the information. And, again, I guess an extra disclaimer, since this is a vaccine episode, you definitely should go over this with your doctor. Help them, help you make it, or have them help you make a decision and make an educated decision.
Your trusted healthcare provider.
Exactly, right. Right, so that was meningococcal vaccine. Was that exciting for you, Melissa? Were you fascinated?
Yeah. So exciting.
It's no laughing matter. I know we're just trying to keep it a little light, but anyway. So what's next? I always feel tired after the disease vaccines.
I know. That's because I
like,
let you do all the time.
I feel like we've just reached a wall. Are we going to
no,
do that?
we're going for it. We're going for it. Yes,
okay,
we're doing some more. There's more coming, guys. Stay tuned.
One more episode. Although they don't know because we put a few days between these episodes. So they're like, oh, good. An episode is coming in next. Sorry, you guys. It's going to be
in a couple
like 3
days.
or 4 days from now.
Yeah.
Anyway,
all right. Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll keep the rest of the diseases we will be doing.
Yep.
So don't worry. We'll cover all of them. And hope you enjoyed this information. And make sure and rate and review us on iTunes. Mm-hmm. We need to announce the day that we're going to do the live Q&A Facebook episode.
Yeah. So let's do that on the next episode, and we'll figure out what day that's going to be, and then we got to pick a day.
Okay. Bye, listeners. Thank you so much.
Let's keep it rolling, and you and I can pick a day right now. All right.
Well, let's pick a day. I mean, let's do this. But synchronize your calendar.
I know. What are you doing? Let's see. I can't do it Saturday the 30th.
Does it have to be a Saturday, right?
Do you want to do a Saturday?
Sure. Let's do the 6th, April 6th.
Okay. Okay, maybe April 6th,
Facebook
9
Live.
o'clock a.m.
Okay, Facebook, sure.
Yeah, okay.
9 o'clock a.m., Facebook Live, April 6th. We're going to do a full hour of Q&A. Are we going to podcast it?
Yeah, live Facebook. Yeah, Facebook Live. Oh, yeah, Facebook Live and podcast.
So we're going to have a separate thing that we can actually look at people's, so we can have one of our phones for the camera and then have something we can actually read their stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, join us. Yeah. So join us April 6th,
9 a.m.
Saturday, 9 a.m. for Facebook Live. And the reason you want to
in.
join us is you can ask us your questions. Ask us, anything that's been, on your mind that you want us to talk for, 5 minutes on, and we'll just go through all the questions. And
okay, we were not going to be able to answer everybody's questions. I just want you to know.
Will.
No, we will
I
not.
will stay until.
Yeah, right.
Until.
I know it's hard sometimes. All the questions come pouring in kind of at once. So make sure it's something that's really now. It doesn't have to be like disease related. It could totally be like, hey, Dr. Bob, what was your feeling when this happened, or whatever. Or it could be Melissa.
Personal questions.
How do you get your bangs so straight? Or, we're here to be available to you, to socialize with you guys, and to connect with you, and in a way that we can't do live on podcasts as easily. So we'll try to incorporate this every now and then, that we can do something like this for you guys too. So April 6th, mark it down in your calendars. Cool. We're signing off. We'll chat with you later.
And sign up on our email list. I'm going to say that every time. Because again, Facebook is going away, everybody. So we need your emails. All right.
And if you don't know what we're talking about, see our censorship post, our censorship podcast.
Yeah. So immunityeducationgroup.org. Go to our email list there, and we will catch you next time on, shall we say it again? The Vaccine Conversation.
We're gonna be the peace we wanna see in the world. Yeah, be the peace we wanna see in the world. Be the love we wanna see in the world. Be the joy we wanna see in the world. Be the change we wanna see in the world.
The information in this podcast is for entertainment purposes only. It is not intended as medical advice. Always consult your healthcare professional for information on vaccines and infectious diseases.